All right. Hello, and welcome to Reading the Revolution. We are so excited to have a jam-packed session for you tonight. So make sure you're joining us in the chat. Let us know where you are coming from and what you're reading. We love to hear what you are reading and what is, good in the bookstores right now. Now, we have a really packed tonight of incredible guests who are thought leaders and luminaries in their fields. So we're really excited to have y'all on tonight with our fantastic guests. So I'm Risa. I am the digital manager here at Women's March. I always forget this part. So I'm really excited to be your host tonight and, sharing these incredible guests, talking about the genres that we all love, and also talking about the world that we are living in and the ways that what we read reflect what is happening around us. And of course, tonight, we're talking about propaganda, disinformation, and wicked witches. So, of course, we can see that happening all around us, and we're going to dig into it really big tonight. All right, so we see people coming in tonight in the chat. Lots of Eastern, and let's see, you got some West happening here. Wild Dark Shore in Wisconsin. All right. Sounds great. Hello, Minnesota. All right. We have a lot of YouTube comments coming in tonight. How are y'all doing, Facebook? Where are you coming from? What are you reading? Right. Hello, Florida. Welcome tonight. Now, tonight is a fun mix of nonfiction and fiction and the ways that these are reflective of each other, because that's really been the whole conversation this entire time that we have been talking about, or that we've been hosting Reading the Revolution. We are talking about these connections between our fictional worlds and our real world, the stories that connect us and the ways that they reflect the worlds that we live in. So we are super excited to have this conversation because it's incredibly timely. Also, if any of y'all are Wicked fans, let me know your favorite song in the chat, because I'm so excited for the movie release. I still haven't seen it. I am waiting to see it with my best friend. So tell us in the chat. Tell us what you're reading. Tell us what your favorite song is from Wicked, if you are excited about that. All right. We have, let's see, ghost stories and a few other things. How fun. We love a spooky story around here too. All right. Devil in the White City and Never Home Alone. Those also sound pretty eerie. Reading as a Jew by Sarah Hurwitz. Excellent. All right. A Year in Province. A Witch's Guide to Magical Innkeeping. That sounds fun. How cutesy. Banned books with red wine and blue. How fun. We just did a series on banned books, an episode about banned books and censorship, and some incredible organizers who have done work to combat censorship in their own communities. And we'll make sure to include the link to that episode in the email that comes out after this session. So keep an eye out on your emails if you registered, because we will be sending out all the resources that we go through tonight. Now, I do want to give some rules for the road. Make sure that you're being kind and good to each other in the chat. This is a community space, and we want to keep it that way. We want to make sure that people are being excellent to each other and not abusive. So if we see you being abusive in the chat, we are heavy-handed on the ban hammer, and we will not let it fly. Additionally, don't spam the chat. Even if we are cool, if you're cool with us, like, spamming the chat is not courteous to the other people in the chat, because we want to hear from all of you. So behave in the chat. Additionally, captions are available on Facebook. If captions are necessary for your participation and experience tonight, please join us on Facebook, because Facebook has caught up on the tech to include closed captioning. YouTube is hit or miss. So Facebook will be the place if you need captions. Finally, we do have some community norms, and those we'll drop that link in the banner. We have some working agreements here. These are basically just more ways of saying be good to each other, but also be curious. Approach from a place of curiosity and trying to understand each other. Now, we are welcoming questions tonight, so make sure if you have questions, ask them in the chat. We won't stop during the conversation to address them, but we are watching and we will come back to them at the end of the session. All right, so let's dive in. Tonight, we are talking about propaganda, disinformation, and wicked witches. I know we have some wicked fans out there. I've certainly been changed for good by this story of who gets to make decisions about what and who are labeled good and wicked, and the systems that they use to do so. But these systems aren't unique to Oz. Like most great fiction, it's a mirror of our own world. So we're going to examine just how systems of disinformation and propaganda influence our perspectives, how they sow mistrust, and prime us to yield to demagogues who promise that they're the only ones who can make it all better. We're starting with a primer on disinformation and propaganda with scholars and authors who've literally written the books on disinformation. Then we'll apply what we've learned with the Wicked Witch of the East herself, Marissa Bodie. So let's dive in. All right, first, I'm going to introduce two authors who have refined my worldview. Barbara McQuaid is a professor from practice at University of Michigan Law School. I can say words. Her alma mater, where she teaches courses in criminal law, criminal procedure, national security, and data privacy. She is also a legal analyst for NBC News and MSNBC and co-host of the Sisters-in-Law podcast. From 2010 to 2017, McQuaid served as the U.S. Attorney for the Eastern District of Michigan. She was appointed by President Barack Obama and was the first woman to serve in her position. Earlier in her career, she worked as a sports writer and copy editor, a judicial law clerk, an associate in private practice, and an assistant U.S. attorney. McQuaid is author of the national bestseller, Attack from Within. She and her husband have 4 children and live in Ann Arbor, Michigan. Hi, Barb.
Hi, Risa. Nice to see you.
Good to meet you and see you. Lee McIntyre is a research fellow at the Center for Philosophy and History of Science at Boston University and senior advisor for public trust in science at the Aspen Institute. Formerly executive director of the Institute for Quantitative Social Science at Harvard University, he previously taught philosophy at Colgate University, Boston University, Simmons College, Tufts Experimental College, and Harvard Extension School. Most recently, he was a visiting fellow at Clare Hall, University of Cambridge, United Kingdom. McIntyre is the best-selling author of Post-Truth, which was named a CNN Book of the Week in April 2018, and the Best Book of 2018 by the PBS NewsHour, along with numerous other books, including The Scientific Attitude, How to Talk to a Science Denier, and On Disinformation, all published with MIT Press. So welcome to you both. I'm so excited to have you both on.
Thank you so much. Nice to see you again too, Barb.
Thanks, Lee. Good to see you. Good to be on with you.
Yeah.
So let's start with some level setting. What are disinformation and propaganda, and how are they similar and distinct from each other?
Well, I can take a stab at answering that, and then Lee, maybe you want to chime in as well.
Sure.
I think that people probably use the terms synonymously. I mean, propaganda is really just to propagate a message. Advertisers do it. People who want to influence you to buy certain products are propagating, just sort of advocating for a position. But I think that it blurs into disinformation, which I define, at least in my book, as false claims or potentially commingled with truthful claims that are designed to advance a particular agenda. Disinformation is a word that comes from the world of counterespionage. And so we've seen throughout history, Russia, for example, being very prolific in the disinformation game. And one of the hallmarks of disinformation is a component of it referred to as active measures, which is it's designed to elicit an emotional response, to get you to feel instead of think, to act instinctively, to get outraged or angry or upset or excited about something, so that you're not making a rational decision. Instead, you are leading with your heart instead of your mind. Lee, I don't know if you have anything to add to
Sure.
that.
Yeah, I would just say that for me, propaganda is too soft a word for what's going on these days, because propaganda can be true. Propaganda can be something that's true, but you're using it in a manipulative way. And I think that the operative distinction that we need to make these days is between misinformation and disinformation. Disinformation is what you'd think of as black propaganda. Disinformation is always false, and it's intentionally false. That is to say that the person who is propagating it understands that it's false, and they're doing it for a reason. They're doing it because they profit, either through money or political power or something like that. Misinformation, sometimes used as a euphemism for disinformation, because people don't want to talk about who's behind it. When it's appropriate to use the word disinformation, I like the harder term, because if you're saying that that there's a lie, then there has to be a liar. And why is the person lying? And we need to get to the bottom of it. So for me, disinformation is where it's at.
Excellent. Thank you. And thank you for that distinction between disinformation and misinformation. Now, you've both written on the extensive impacts of disinformation in eroding trust, because that's the goal, is to erode trust in the most core institutions of little d democracy. Can you talk a little bit about what happens when the population stops trusting news reporting and scientists, medical professionals, and governance structures?
You want to go first this time, Lee?
Sure. Yeah. So I wrote a book called On Disinformation, and I had to start thinking about what is disinformation and what is its goal. And what it really boils down to, I think, is that there are three goals behind disinformation. First, the easy one, the one that everybody sees, is that it's to try to get you to believe a falsehood. They're saying something that isn't true because they want you to think that it's true. But the second goal of disinformation is that they're trying to polarize you against the people on the other side. They're trying to get you. It's a kind of a team building exercise, right? Where you're distrusting and maybe even hating the people who don't believe the same lie that you're believing. And then there's a third goal, which is to make you cynical. And so you can polarize people who believe the disinformation and the people who don't, by making them feel like, well, there's nothing that we can do. They're just everybody's going to lie. Some people are going to believe it. What can we do about it? The third goal is actually, I think, the most dangerous, because it convinces us that we are helpless, and we're not helpless. And here I can't help but quote one of my favorite authors, Hannah Arendt. I wrote it out so I wouldn't get it wrong. She says, if everybody always lies to you, the consequence is not that you believe the lie, but rather that nobody believes anything any longer. And a people that no longer can believe anything cannot make up its mind. It is deprived not only of its capacity to act, but also of its capacity to think and to judge. And with such a people, you can then do what you please. That last line gives me chills. With such a people, you can then do what you please. If you can get people to be cynical and just to check out, you can lead them anywhere you want.
Yeah, and I'll just chime in that I agree with everything that Lee just said. I teach a course in national security at the University of Michigan Law School, and we cover information warfare. And one of the items I have my students read is Robert Mueller's report about Russian interference in the 2016 election. And I think when people think about that, they sometimes think about what it did or did not conclude about Donald Trump's campaign. But the reason I ask my students to read it is to focus on Russia's conduct. And what Robert Mueller concludes there is that, very similarly, there were three goals of this operation. One was to influence the outcome of the election, but also to undermine public confidence in elections. That elections just aren't fair. You can't rely on them. They're rife with fraud and cheating. And also to stoke division in American society. They created false social media personas, from that appeared to be people from across the political spectrum. They had names like Heart of Texas or Blacktivist, Tennessee GOP, and Army of Jesus, United Muslims of America, every walk of life you can imagine. But they said awful things so that people would read this and think that people who are affiliated with that affinity say and think these awful things. And then you would see the comments down below where people are arguing with each other. One of the authors I cite in my book is a man named Peter Pomerantsev, who has studied media in Russia. And one of the things he said is very similar to what Lee was saying now, which is the goal isn't to convince people that Putin is not corrupt or that oligarchs there are not corrupt. It's to convince people that everybody's corrupt. You can't believe in anything. The news is, littered with lies. Politicians are all corrupt. And so ultimately people become cynical and disengaged from politics and feel that their vote doesn't matter anyway. And so all they're going to focus on is their family and their jobs and stay out of politics altogether. And of course, that's a very dangerous place to be in a democracy. We need people informed and engaged and up on the issues so that they can participate in our democracy. And the goal is to get people to not pay attention, to check out, to say, I'm overwhelmed. And that is where Hannah Arendt speaks of a population that can be led anywhere.
Yeah, and that population that can be led anywhere is so vulnerable as well when you have people who are checked out and people who are fervent followers and are ready to do anything for the one person, the only person they think they can trust. Yeah. And people, when they're also fearful or when they're mistrustful, they look for a strong man. And I think that makes us incredibly vulnerable as well. But Barb, I want to step back because one of the most jarring parts of attack from within is when you point out that so many of these social media accounts are sock puppets. And I think most people watching, because they're watching on social media, are social media users in some capacity. And I'm sure most of us watch or listen to some forms of news media, television, and movies. What are some signs that can help people better recognize if they're consuming disinformation or being propagandized?
Yeah, such a good question. So a lot of the information that's on social media is, it's fake. It's posed by somebody who's just trying to get you outraged and repost and get angry about things. So I'll tell you some of the signs you can look for is, if it's a credible news outlet, you can probably count on it. If it's somebody with an individual's name, like Patriot Girl 1776, like beware, right? That's just a person pretending to be a person. It might not be real. But even if it looks legit, you have to dig a little deeper. I can recall a time when I saw a social media post purporting to be from ESPN SportsCenter, stating that Patrick Mahomes, the NFL quarterback, had said he was not going to play another down until the Kansas City Chiefs changed their name to something that was not offensive to Native Americans. And I thought it was real. I reposted it. And only later did I realize it was fake. And I had fallen for it. And I had spread disinformation. But when I looked a little more closely, I realized that it was not from ESPN SportsCenter. It actually said ESPN SportsCenter. So looking carefully at the source and making sure there's not a typo in it, I think is a very good practice. I think that if we see something online that we think is unusual or newsworthy or startling or surprising in some way, what we really ought to do is, number one, check the source and make sure it is a credible source, or look for a second source. If it really is something newsworthy, many media outlets are going to be reporting the same thing. You're not going to see that story just because, one guy said it on social media. If it's a big enough story, most of the major news outlets are going to have it. So look for confirmation. And another thing I think I would say is how important it is, even if you're looking at a credible news site, how important it is that you look beyond the headline that accompanies a story. Today, many headlines are not a summary of what the article is about, but are instead clickbait. It's designed to get you to click on it because then you have to watch the video. And if you watch the video, that means you will generate ad revenue for the media company. But oftentimes, the headline is actually quite misleading and can lead you to the wrong conclusion about what it is you're reading. I'll give you an example of one I saw not long ago. It said, behind the Caitlin Clark media meltdown. This was in the New York Times, the Athletic, their sports section. You may know that Caitlin Clark is a women's basketball player, star player. She gets some sharp elbows in the WNBA because she is a superstar. And behind the Caitlin Clark media meltdown made me think that, oh no, she must have had a break. She must have had a breakdown. She must have had a temper tantrum. But that's completely opposite of what the story actually said. Because when I clicked on it, what it said is that it was a reporter, a member of the media, who'd had this temper tantrum talking about Caitlin Clark. Caitlin Clark herself did not have a media meltdown. So you have to read that for yourself. So those are some of the hallmarks. There's also, if somebody has a name like Lee 654321, probably not a real person. That's a sign of bots. And so, the social media is also littered with these bots who are just AI chat bots. They're designed mostly to amplify the false messages put out by disinformers to make it look like their messages are more popular than they actually are. So that's another tell that you can look for. And then, of course, we haven't even really scratched the surface of artificial intelligence, where we're seeing now deep fakes that are so real that it's difficult for us to trust what we see or hear.
Yeah. And actually, Lee, I want to come back to that, but go right ahead, because
I was just going to say plus one to everything that Barbara just said. I'm also going to have to change my screen name because it's Lee 654321. No, listen. The main thing. So those are some great practical on the ground tips of what we can look for. I think just as important is the overall attitude, which is to understand that when you're reading Facebook, when you're looking at whatever digital source of news you're looking at, you are not just passively, you shouldn't just think of yourself as passively consuming news. You are in some sense entering a battlefield. There's a book right behind me on the shelf called The Handbook of Russian Information Warfare. It's free. It's a NATO training manual. You can get it online, or you can get a hard copy from NATO like I did. And it talks about all of the tactics of information warfare that Russia uses against American troops, against European troops, against its own citizens. Here's the bottom line. We are in an information war, and people don't realize it. So when you get on Twitter, when you get on Facebook, you are entering a battlefield. And so as the Canadians say, elbows up. You have to realize because the only way to win an information war is to realize that you're in one. You have to be paying attention to the fact that somebody is trying to get you to believe something, and you have to wonder, why are they trying to do that?
Absolutely. Now, what are some current trends? Because it has evolved rapidly. I think your books have come, like some of what you've written was in the first Trump administration, and some of it is right after. So there are new trends. It's constantly evolving, and rapidly so. How has AI also changed the game?
I'll let you go first if you like, Lee.
Okay,
I'm happy to jump in.
I mean, AI, my goodness, what a propagandist dream is AI. I mean, if you look back, the whole concept of disinformation was invented in 1923 during the Russian Revolution. Then the tactics were really, modified by the cigarette companies when they wanted to show that cigarettes didn't cause lung cancer, and taking out full-page ads. But now all you need to do is to have chatbots or lies online, and AI will make them for you. Used to be that the barrier to disinformation getting through was that the quality wasn't very good. Well, now the quality is excellent. I mean, you not only have, everybody's heard of deep fakes. What you have now is the ability through this recent app, I think it's called Sora, where you can just slap a face on anybody doing anything and make it so. And there's the real danger, because once you can, because once you can do that, then the danger is not just that you're going to take the false thing for true. It's that you're going to take the true thing for false. And that means that video evidence, audio evidence, the concept of truth itself is maybe over. That's what makes people cynical. That's when the information war is really raging. We have to find trusted sources. And that means that people have to realize, as I just said a minute ago, that, AI is so good that you really do have to be careful of what you're seeing, because it's just it's ubiquitous.
Yeah, and I'll just add a couple of things. You would think that we have access to this tool, we would come up with, great ways to use it for medicine and traffic safety, and it is being used in that way. But we also, human nature can't help but figure out all the ways we can use this for evil ends as well. One of the most popular AI apps are these nudify apps, where you can take a picture of a teenage girl from her Instagram page and turn her into a pornographic site, put her face on some hideous porn site. And it's become very popular with high schools, and humiliating for the girls who have never actually posed in these pictures. That's been going around and causing a lot of emotional harm to young people and a lot of emotional trauma. In addition, there is something referred to as the liar's dividend, which is because of the concept of fake news, and now because of this concept of deep fakes, even when there is an incriminating story or an incriminating photo, the subject of that photo can just say, well, how do you know that's even real? That's just fake. Last summer, Kamala Harris came to Detroit Metro Airport right after she had named Tim Walz as her running mate. And there was a rally at Detroit Metro Airport, and thousands of people showed up at this thing. I think they estimated 15,000 people in an airport hangar, and there are photos of it. President Trump posted a picture of that, and then another picture that appeared identical with no people there. And he said that Kamala Harris had used AI to make it look like people had shown up to her rally when in fact no one was there. And here's a photo of what it really looked like. So you can see how it can be used to just change. We've been so trained for it to believe that seeing is believing, that if we see something with our own eyes, we can believe it to be true. I don't know that all is lost, though. I think that as time goes on, we will become more savvy. There was a time when people were falling for these fraud scams from the Nigerian prince who wanted to know your bank account number. I think over time we become more savvy. And I think with education, we can build resilience so that we can process that which is false from that which is true. But it's not going to happen overnight. As Lee said, we're in an information war. We need to recognize it and prepare ourselves for it so that we can build resilience against it.
Yes.
Now, really quickly, Barb, the end of your book, give some steps that people can take. Do you want to give just something that viewers can take away with them, that they can do in their everyday lives to be better equipped for this war?
Yeah, I've already shared some tips about, sources and other things that you can do to educate yourself. But I think the other thing that's super important to make is that many times people know that information is false, and they go along with the con anyway, because they define themselves as a member of a tribe. One of the things that I think manipulators have tried to do, politicians, and one reason they use disinformation is to divide and conquer us. We want to have us versus them. And I think that when we identify ourselves as being a member of a particular tribe, sometimes we are willing to play along with false claims. I mean, I saw people say that Joe Biden had perfect mental acuity and was well prepared for another 4 years in office, even after seeing his performance at the debate. There are people who said that they believed that there was fraud in the 2020 election. People like Ted Cruz and Josh Hawley, who certainly knew better, Ivy League educated lawyers in the U.S. Senate. And why do they do these things? I think part of it is they convince themselves that their narrative is true because they want it to be true. And so I think the one takeaway I would ask our viewers is that we make sure that we are accepting truth, even when it's inconvenient and maybe when it goes against our perceived side. I think one of the ways to retain the importance of truth is to choose truth over your own tribe.
Lee, would you like to add to that?
Yeah, I mean, my book, I've got literally at the end of the book 10 steps that you can do to fight back. It's a short book. It's you can read it in about an hour, so I don't want to steal from myself at the end, but I'll say this. I think that the most important thing that we can do to fight back is to tell the truth over and over from the largest platform that we can find. People don't understand that just simply telling the truth, simply standing by the truth is so important. Just have this idea that, well, we tell the truth and somebody doesn't believe us, and so we walk away. There's a cognitive bias that we all have about called the repetition effect. And you see Trump use it every day. Why does he repeat falsehoods so many times? Because it works. So let's do that for truth as well. So again, tell the truth. See, I'm doing it now. Tell the truth over and over from the largest platform that you can find. And if you don't think that telling the truth is important, ask yourself why Navalny was such a thorn in the side of Putin. Here's a dictator who had everything in his favor. One guy, one gadfly who just wouldn't go away, was such a threat to his regime that he had him killed. One person telling the truth can make a big difference. We need millions.
Excellent. Thank you both so much for your incredible insights. And in the chat, keep sending your questions so we can come back and answer them at the end of the session. Now, let's look through an emerald colored lens. A running theme throughout Reading the Revolution is that our favorite fictional worlds are mirrors and foils to the real world that we live in. Disinformation and propaganda are central running themes in Wicked and Wicked for Good, posing the questions, why does wickedness happen? Are people born wicked, or do they have wickedness thrust upon them? Throughout part one, we see the role of disinformation, deception, and propaganda machines in scapegoating animals, vilifying the protagonist Elphaba for her stand against injustice, and ultimately upholding the fragile power of the wizard as a power-hungry dictator. Our guest, Marissa Bodie, stars as Nessa Rose in the epic universal feature Wicked, opposite Cynthia Erivo and Ariana Grande. This monumental casting marks her very first on-screen role. And what a first role, right? Marissa is a disabled actress who uses a wheelchair, and she will reprise her role in Wicked for Good, which will be released tomorrow, November 21st, 2025. So, welcome, Marissa.
Hi, thank you for having me.
We are so excited to have you. Now, you play Nessa Rose Throp, the sister of Elphaba, who we know is the Wicked Witch of the West. And from the jump, there's a pretty clear contrast between your characters. Nessa is excited for a fresh start to find her place and fit in, while Elphaba, both by nature of being defiantly courageous and by being green, had really let go of the idea of fitting in by the time we meet her. Much like Elphaba, we see you, Marissa, the person, speaking out courageously and boldly, even when it may go against the grain. So, what motivates you to do that? How do you weigh the risks against the rewards?
Truly, for me, at the end of the day, the most important thing to me is people and just caring about other people. I think that's just the solid baseline. I know sometimes I've gotten comments a few times being like, but you're an actress, like, or people are just shocked that I do speak so boldly and so bluntly about things. But I think there's almost been a culture created about not saying too much or just like tiptoeing around the point or tiptoeing around things, and that we are actors and so we're supposed to be just that. um, and I think that personally doesn't make any sense to me. I think it's important when you are seen in front of so many people to use your voice and use whatever power you have. I think especially now with social media, and we see things like stan culture and followers and fans doing whatever their favorite says, or upholding whatever to almost pedestal whoever their favorite is. So we see the impact and the influence that obviously those in the public eye have. So so to have the idea that those within the public eye should just be quiet, or those that are actors or singers or what have you should just do that as a job, I don't think that makes any sense. And I think we should care, and we should do our part, and we should use our voice. Obviously actors and singers, I don't think we should necessarily hold them to the same standards, of course, that we do our politicians. I think that's totally something completely separate. But I do think it is important to speak out when you can, share mutual aid when you can, share resources when you can. Um, and yeah, again, I think my baseline of everything is just caring about others, and in terms of whatever backlash I may receive, or whatever. I know I had a polyester shoot come out today, and part of what I said in that interview is it's okay for not every I'm okay with not everybody liking me. In fact, like that, I think if we tiptoe around things, and if we continue to people please, I don't think that's how change happens. And I think that's something that Alphaba relates to, and that's what I see and see reflected with Alphaba also, is not being afraid to just do what she knows is right, bottom line.
Yeah, thank you. Now, historically, we've seen storytelling, including theater and film, used and abused for propaganda and disinformation. In Wicked, we see that in the form of the book Young Elphaba Reads to Baby Nessa Rose, as well as Wizamania itself. However, we also know that truth telling through story is a medium for defiance and resistance, like what we see from Dr. Dillamond. So, what do you think the role of storytellers, like actors and filmmakers, is in this time of rising disinformation?
I think art in general has historically been a way to get people to emote and possibly get people to reflect as well. I think people seeing themselves within art, whether it is a movie or TV show or what have you, and fully seeing it played out in front of them. I think sometimes when people are incredibly set in their ways, or think they have one clear idea of one thing because they might be looking into an echo chamber, or living in an echo chamber rather, or they just don't see much outside of what's right in front of them. I think when we're sharing art and we're sharing storytelling and we're playing it out visually in front of somebody, I think that's a way for people to further and hopefully reflect on themselves, and see themselves and be like, wait a minute, maybe I am the villain in this story. Maybe I am the one that needs to come back down to earth. And I think that's what makes art so beautiful, and films like Wicked so beautiful.
And I wonder too about diversity of perspective, because there are so many people in so many different parts of even just our country who live in very homogenous communities and may not see other perspectives like this, except in film and in books and in plays that might come through their towns. So now, Wicked being one of these stories has some of these really rich themes, and the casting has been incredibly diverse. It's been a really incredible retelling of this story. So, for you, what do Wicked and Wicked for Good and its themes mean to you personally as an actress? Why these movies, and why now?
I think it's incredibly important. I think Wicked as a whole, and the story of Wicked itself, it's been it's been obviously on Broadway for so many years, and the book, of course, was written a while ago as well. I think the point is about the reflection of government or whatever throughout periods of time. It doesn't really have one distinct point in time. I think it's a reflection of those in power as a whole, really. Um, and I think now, especially in terms of just in terms of those those within power, and how they just I'm trying to figure out how to phrase it. I'm like, because it's hard to say because again, like it's a story throughout history, but I think now more than ever when those within power and those in general when it comes to disinformation and are saying things like this isn't real or this is a hoax and things like that and are doing everything in their power to try to to have either those on their side or those in general in the public eye. I think Wicked does Wicked does a good job of showcasing that, and I think we see that also in For Good in a lot of ways. Of even like the posters that we see in the very beginning of Elphaba, and she has like these claws, and she's scary, and things like that in terms of disinformation. I think that carries through today and also social media as well, of course, and uh, also like what was being said earlier about AI and all of that, and seeing something or seeing a headline and not going back and checking it because I think humans really love convenience
Mhm.
rather than going back and further following up on it. Um, I think that's something that is displayed in Wicked as well in terms of even, oh my gosh, what song is it? There's a song sort of towards the beginning of Wicked, and it's basically or Wicked for Good, without giving away too much. But it's basically the Munchkins and Munchkinland being like, well, I heard this, and I heard this about Elphaba, the Wicked Witch of the West,
Mhm.
and so it's it's really a thing of making sure that we're reflecting, and I think also that's a big part of Wicked for Good is questioning ourselves and asking questions, and not just like living in an echo chamber and really making sure that we're checking in with ourselves, and potentially maybe if we dig deep enough popping our own bubbles in the bubbles that we live in.
Love that. Oh my god, how cute. Like the look, I'm like so excited for so much of part two, and so like popping bubbles. I think I have a feeling that that's going to play really big. But also, you reminded me of a really important parallel because in Everyday More Wicked, they do say all these things about her. They're spreading all these rumors. I think one that's not too spoilery because it was in The Wizard of Oz. Is somebody says, I hear her soul is so unclean, pure water can melt her. And um, and then in the very beginning, in No One Mourns the Wicked, Glinda talks about, what the famous line is, the truth we all believe will by and by outlive the lie for you. And she never finishes that line because she does know the truth. And so there really is some mirroring happening where they talk about, these lies that are perpetuated, they're all going to believe that. And that's their truth because it's been repeated so many times, because it's been so deeply embedded. So I think that does, and it comes up in so many ways. How like every time Glinda does something, it's called good, it's because she's done something accidentally or she's doing something selfish that just comes off as so polite and so nice. And so we just see this over and over throughout the course of the movie and the show itself. And now, after a long run on Broadway and pretty much constant touring, Wicked does have a huge following. So the expectations of the cast were high. But speaking for me, I'd say that they've been exceeded. John M. Chu brought such grandness and that unique magic that you can only get in movies. I got to see it again on stage pretty recently, and I think there's like I am like deeply grateful that this was brought to the screen and it got the grandiosity that I think this story really deserves. And now something that was especially great about this casting though is that everybody has brought something special to their roles, and you in particular have changed the game for Nessa Rose. What's been so special for you about this role?
I think what's been incredibly special is being being authentically cast in the first place. I think it was high time for that to happen, and for a disabled actress to play the role, whether it was me or whoever else. And now we see Jenna Bainbridge on Broadway, who is also disabled, ambulatory wheelchair user, playing that role. And so we see that great move in the right direction for sure. And that was incredibly important to me in the audition process. And I really did keep saying, like, if it wasn't me, just I really hope that they power through and go with somebody who is actually physically disabled, which the casting call in general was looking for. It was calling for somebody who was physically disabled and who was actually disabled. So that's important to me, and also as a woman of color, of course, it's incredibly important. And now I feel obviously, of course, a responsibility, but also happy that I can extend further past that with whatever platform that I have now. Again, to just use my voice, but to, oh no, to use my voice, but to also, it was the witchy magic. Something caused it
It
to
was
fall.
Elpha by herself. Like,
It was, that would make sense.
right.
But yeah, just extend further beyond just representation in terms of disability, like things like we just see things like SNAP benefits
Mhm.
being repealed, and fighting for affordable and accessible housing for disabled people, and recognizing that not every disabled person can work. And I know America has a huge culture of pulling yourself up by your bootstraps and working and whatever else, but that's not the case for disabled people. There's a lot of disabled people that have things like chronic pain or whatever else, or maybe immune compromise that quite literally prevents them from working, and puts an incredible strain on their bodies. So I think continuing to talk about that and extend beyond representation, because although representation is great, it's not the only thing that will save our community, especially now. So I think casting is incredibly important, but I encourage those to extend further beyond that and follow more disabled people. Read up on disability rights, and watch disability media, documentaries. There's a lot out there, because disabled people cannot do this on our own. A lot of us, our bodies won't let us, unfortunately.
And I think a lot of people only start to care when it affects them. And I think a lot of people learn the hard way that physical ability and really mental acuity ability in general is a temporary state of affairs. And when we build a world that is better equipped for everybody, for people with disabilities and people without disabilities, when we are able to accommodate, and really not even just accommodate, but build better from the bottom up, I think it serves a better world in general. And so I'm so happy that you were able to join us and that you are advocating in the way that you are. It is incredible to see you on screen. Really excited to see you on screen tomorrow. And now we're going to have everybody come back on, and we're going to do some Q&A. You ready, y'all?
Ready.
All right. So we do have a few questions. This one really struck at the heart. How do we keep from losing faith?
Oh, I'll take a stab.
Go for it, Lee.
I like to look at the other people around me, the normal things that are happening. I mean, in a time when first thing that we do in the morning when we get up is look at our phone and see what the latest outrage is, the latest, trouble. I mean, today it was that the CDC is now backing off the truth that autism is not caused by the MMR vaccine. When that's the first thing that we're hit with in the day, it's easy to feel like there's nothing that we can do. It's just a tide. And so, I mean, I forget where I heard it, but self-care is a form of resistance. Just taking part of the day to make sure that we are uh, taking care of the other people around us and looking at the small things that make life worth living, so that we're not just giving ourselves over to this kind of um, hopelessness that, all we want to do is escape. Parties I go to, people talk about, well, what's your escape plan? Where are you going to go? I don't want to escape. I want to stay and fight for my country. I mean, that's what we can do. We can represent what it means to be, to care about your country and to want it to be better than it is now. I think that could give us hope.
Yeah, what I always come back to is, remember the advice Mr. Rogers would give? I remember this after 9/11, but after any bad incident, was look for the helpers.
Yes.
Wherever you go, you will see people doing kind things. If you live online and you spend a lot of time reading the news, you would think that the world is just filled with these selfish, greedy, cynical people. But of course, all around us are wonderful people. Teachers and faith leaders and volunteers and nurses and so many wonderful, good people around. So look for those people. They will give you hope and help you keep faith, I think.
Yeah, I think a lot of people, especially those in power, oftentimes maybe banking on us losing faith so that we don't continue to fight the good fight. I think it's important to look at those around us and remember who we are as people and remember what's important to us and to continuously use our voices whenever we can. Of course, to Lee's point, to take that time for ourselves when we know we're spiraling or maybe just really feel like we're in a pit, to breathe a little bit, maybe decompress, do something that we enjoy, to get off social media for a little bit, and then get back to it because there's a lot of fighting to still be done.
Right. Thanks, y'all. Now, another question. Aren't AI things supposed to have a photo stamp?
Well,
So, oh, go ahead, Barb.
I can take a stab at that. Many of the things on social media are not labeled. There is a push to require labeling of things that are AI generated. I think we could legislate that things on social media be labeled with AI. There are technological ways to use what's called a watermark to identify things that are authentic. So the technology is there. It really is just getting social media companies to go along with it. I don't think they're going to do it on their own. I think we need legislation. Of course, that's why we see people like Mark Zuckerberg and Elon Musk pumping tons of money into political campaigns so that they can avoid regulation. But I think that would be the kind of thing, very consistent with free speech, allowing deep fakes on social media. Sometimes they're satire and they're funny and they're interesting, but at least you would know it was generated with artificial intelligence. I think that's a great solution to this growing problem.
One difficulty, though, is that the next thing that will happen is somebody will say, "Oh, but the photo stamp was fake." I mean,
Right.
there's no technological solution to this problem. We can have all the watermarks and chain of custody and different brilliant people working on this problem that we want, but there is no technological solution to malevolence. And we have to remember that that's where this is coming from. It's coming from human malevolence. How's that for a connection with Wicked?
So, this dovetails into another question. Do you have suggestions for regulating AI? What does that look like? Now, Marissa, being an actor, I think this has come up quite a bit in recent years for the actors, the Screen Actors Guild has fought really hard on this.
Yeah, totally. I know obviously that was one of the main points of the strike 2 years ago or like a year and a half ago, was regulations, and obviously we fought for that. I think it's something that we're going to consistently have to fight for now that we see things like AI actors potentially being introduced, which is incredibly scary and I think will be incredibly detrimental to the craft itself. Um, but in terms of regulating it, I think just if we have to, potentially doing another strike, using our voices consistently. I know I've definitely spoke about it before. In terms of disinformation, I jokingly created a fake rumor that I have beef with this AI actress who, of course, doesn't really exist. Um, but I think just continuing to talk about it and make sure that we're on the right side of things and adamantly against it. I think honestly the general public currently seems to be fairly against it, which at least from what I can see, which I think is good in terms of AI actors. But I think it is something we might have to consistently push back on and continue to push back on.
I love that, Marissa. You have a smackdown with Tilly, right?
I
And
do,
that
I do.
that was
We have beef for real. She hates me.
yeah,
She
that's
called me a bunch of
nice.
names. She spit on me. All of that.
Team Marissa every
I'm
day.
I'm on your side.
Thank you, thank you. I appreciate it.
All right. So, how do you know when a conversation with someone who disagrees about something factual or infactual is no longer productive?
I Can I take a stab at that one?
Absolutely. You wrote on about how to talk
How to
to
talk to science denier. So in the fall of 2018, I went to the Flat Earth International Conference, and I didn't quite know what to expect. What was going to happen here. I found that I could have very productive conversations, which is not to say that I changed someone's mind, but what I taught myself is that if you just show up face to face and you're not the ogre that they had thought you were, and that you actually listen, you can have respectful conversation. And so, for a conversation to go off the rails, for it to be, what did the person say, no longer productive, is really when the person is no longer listening. And I would say, you can tell when somebody's not listening, and you can break it off, and I've broken off conversations. But what I tend to like to do is to preempt that sort of an end to a conversation by approaching it with a curiosity and a question of letting them speak first, and then just listening as long as they want to speak. Sooner or later they'll say, well, don't you think I'm right? And there's your opportunity. So it was terrifying and strange to be there for 48 hours, but I had some very productive conversations where I learned a lot, because people really loved to talk about this topic, and I learned that the really scary part was not what they believed, but why they believed it, because it was the why they believed it part that was also why people believe that climate change isn't real, why people believe that the vaccines don't work or are dangerous. There's this blueprint it goes back to the tobacco companies that now has jumped into American politics. So getting out there and having a face-to-face conversation, I think, is often very productive. If they're insulting you, if they're spitting on you, you're allowed to leave.
That's great advice, Lee. And if I could just add, I think that, especially when it comes to loved ones with whom we might disagree on things like, vaccines or politics or other kinds of things, you do have to think about, your ultimate goal is probably to preserve the relationship and accept that maybe there are things about which you will disagree. And that's okay, that you can agree to disagree. But I think that you should not give up on them. And that even if they don't admit to you that they've changed their mind, you can at least plant a seed, because if they like you, chances are they respect you. And if they respect you, they're going to want to be aligned with your kind of thinking. And so you have far more influence over the people in your immediate sphere than anyone else. And so sharing with them your views is going to cause them to rethink their own, even if they don't say so out loud. So you can plant a seed, you can do so respectfully, you can listen to their viewpoint, and it may not be one conversation, it might take 100 conversations, but eventually they might come around. I've actually seen that happen with my mother and my father-in-law, who in 2016 were Trump supporters. And after many years of listening and paying attention and reading and seeing how things have shaken out, have changed their minds on him. So I think that conversations can be productive even if it is not apparent.
I think I agree. I think it comes down to the conversation of respect. I think it's
Mhm.
a conversation is very much different than a full-blown angry argument, and I think it's different from I think a conversation is different from arguing just to be right rather than arguing to listen and arguing trying to understand. So I think it comes down to both respect and a place of empathy and
Mhm.
sympathy, and also a place of really just trying to understand.
Now, this is perfect because on Monday, we are actually going to be talking with Rich Logus of Leaving MAGA. He was MAGA himself. He had his own kind of awakening and developed his own nonprofit to help others on their journey out. So, we're going to be talking about this very topic, how to have those uncomfortable conversations, especially with the holidays coming up. So, I will drop the link in the chat for that. And in the meantime, thank you so much for joining us tonight. This has been such an incredible conversation. You've all been such lovely guests, and we are so appreciative of your insights. For everybody else here tonight, thank you for being here with us. This recording will live on YouTube. So if you missed part of it, you can come back to it. If you want to watch it over and over again, it'll live there. If you registered for tonight's call, we will also be sending out links. There were so many resources. A bunch of you were dropping really great recommended readings in the chat. So we will incorporate some of those as well, and links to both Barb and Lee's books. And so thank you all for joining us. Thank you, Marissa, Barb, Lee, for being with us tonight. Have a great evening.
Thanks, Risa. Good night.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Bye, everybody.